Now available for the first time on Google Play, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are falling apart in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy on Google Play today. A former CEO is now expressing regret for participating in the mob violence as he's facing federal charges. Now, your Bradley Roustokoulis was a chief executive officer at an Illinois tech company until it was found out that he was one of the individuals who participated in the mob violence that took place when a group of Trump supporters stormed into the Capitol building. And now that he has been arrested and is now facing federal charges as related to the crimes that were perpetrated in the Capitol building, your Bradley Roustokoulis is now speaking out and saying that he made the worst decision of his life. However, when I take a critical examination of your Bradley Roustokoulis and his behavior and his remorse, it fits right in line with the pattern and profile I talk about regarding beta males in my book, The Man Crisis. And your Bradley Roustokoulis clearly is a man in crisis, and the reason why he is a man in crisis is because he is one of these beta males who sees the world through the view of rose-colored glasses. And from that view of rose-colored glasses, his reality does not appear like the real world. No, in the rose-colored picture of the reality that he sees, the images of reality are distorted by that rose-colored picture that has been presented to him. And in that rose-colored picture, your Bradley Roustokoulis thought that because he was a white male, he was justified in going down to that Capitol building to not only participate in that protest with those Trump supporters, but that he could go out here and storm into the Capitol building in an effort to fight for the so-called freedoms of Americans. And your Bradley Roustokoulis, as he stormed into this Capitol building, thought he could do this with absolutely no consequences whatsoever, because the beta male, because he lives in a rose-colored world, he does not, again, see the real world, and he does not see the consequences of the real world, because in the eyes of the beta male, he believes he can go out here and do whatever he wants without having to deal with any sort of consequences for his actions. Because in the beta male's mind, for every action, there is no opposite and equal reaction or any sort of response when you go out here and do things. They see the world as one-sided, and they see the world as coming from them doing things and not having to deal with any sort of consequences or ramifications for their actions. And that's what Bradley Roustokoulis and many of the members of that Trump-supporting mob thought when they stormed the Capitol building. They thought they would be able to get away with this and not be able to deal with any consequences whatsoever. So in their rose-colored eyes, they thought they could just come into this Capitol building, participate in a riot, tear up the place, and then be able to go on with their lives. And this CEO thought that after participating in this riot, where there were video cameras practically playing from every news media outlet and security cameras on every floor of the Capitol building and on the streets all throughout Washington, D.C., he was going to be able to go home and go back to his life. And that just shows you how dysfunctional beta male thinking is, and how many of these beta males in their rose-colored world have complete tunnel vision, because these beta males, they just don't live in our reality. No, they live in a reality all their own, similar to what Elliot Rodger, the La Isla Vista shooter, lived in. And because these people live in their own distorted reality, they cannot see the harm they do to others, nor can they see that, again, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And these males, they could not, and females, could not see the harm they were doing to our country because they were the patriots in their own deluded eyes, and they were going to be able to restore the country back to the state they wanted it to be in. So, in their eyes, they saw themselves as patriots and heroes, but the rest of the world saw them as terrorists who were out to send a message to the Congress and the Senate not to ratify the election of Joe Biden, or they would have to deal with the threat of they the people, and they the people who were going to make the country great again by going out here and forcing their political candidate to get a victory. That's what they thought they were doing, because in their rose-colored view, the election results did not meet their standards, so they were going to change that standard with not only just violence, but an act of terrorism that was practically a seditious act. So these individuals, they were out here looking to do harm, and they believed they were justified in doing harm. And that's the same frame of thinking many beta males have when they go out here and participate in their spectrum of violent behaviors. And what we saw at the Capitol building was on the extreme as related to the spectrum of violent behaviors that beta males participate in. And this act of terrorism and sedition is ranked right up there with those mass shooters as related to the spectrum of violent behaviors and how extreme those behaviors can get with these beta males. Because beta males, they don't think about the consequences of their actions. They don't think about the harm they do to others, because oftentimes your beta males oftentimes are focused on their feelings, and many of these beta males and females were caught up in their feelings about Donald Trump losing the election, that they were not thinking about the consequences of their actions or the harm they were doing not only to others but to the fabric of our already fragile and divided country. Now, these beta males, now that they have actually gotten their release of expressing their rage, are now coming down to reality now that they're having to deal with the consequences of their actions. And this Bradley Stockless, this CEO, now that he's dealing with the consequences of his actions, now he wants to talk about how he's expressing regret for what he did. And this is typical of your beta male. When he goes out here and does harm to others, then he wants to express regret and remorse, because the reality of their behavior, it winds up coming to fruition, and they have to think about not only the reprehensible and egregious actions they have participated in, but they also have to think about the consequences of those actions. And they have to, when they have to deal with the consequences of those actions, that's when their remorse starts to set in. And these beta males, he's sitting here talking about it's the worst decision of his life. Unfortunately, had he done some critical thinking, maybe he would not have made this decision, because any critical thinker would have said, I have a lot to lose. And you would think a CEO of a corporation would have done some critical thinking before he decided to go and join a mob to storm the Capitol building. But this beta male did not want to think about his future, because in his mind he thought he had nothing to lose, and he thought that he, like those Ku Klux Klansmen many years ago who lynched black men, and those terrorists who went out and burned down towns like Black Wall Street and Rosewood, he would have the anonymity of being in the mob and use that anonymity to be able to resume his life after he participated in his acts of violence and terrorism. Unfortunately, he didn't understand that in today's high-tech world, there are cameras not only in the Capitol building to identify him, but there were also cameras all on the streets on that Washington street where that protest was taking place, and there were cameras from news media all throughout the world. So these terrorists did not have the anonymity that their grandfathers and great grandfathers had when they participated in their acts of terrorism against black people. And these terrorists who participated in an act of terrorism against the country wound up having their identities revealed to the world. And what we're finding in that mob of people is that they come from all walks of life, and all of these people, they were coming from being rich and being poor. And we have not only white supremacists in corporate America like the CEO, we also had white supremacists in the police department and other branches of government. And all of these people, they are now being revealed, and now, as I see it, pretending to express regret that they've gotten caught. And if they had not gotten caught, I doubt any of these individuals would have any sort of regret, because the only reason why many beta males express regret for their actions is because they're caught and they're going to be held accountable for them. This is one of the reasons why some mass shooters wind up committing suicide, because they want to avoid being held accountable. And this individual, he's now trying to pretend to express regret because now he has to deal with the accountability of not only losing his job, but also having to deal with federal charges as related to the criminal behavior he participated in. But what I find to be quite really troubling about this whole situation is that this individual was a CEO of a tech company, and your CEOs are supposed to be individuals who are supposed to be good critical thinkers, and they're supposed to have long-term thinking skills. So here we have an individual who is in charge of a corporation, and he doesn't have the critical thinking skills to think long-term about the consequences of his actions, and he doesn't have the critical thinking skills to think, hey, maybe me going to this protest isn't a good thing, and maybe me storming this Capitol building isn't a good thing because I have to go out here and work for this corporation. I have to go out here and represent this company's image. I'm the face of this company. But this guy, again, wasn't thinking, because beta males don't think critically. No, most beta males feel, and beta males run on their emotions. And because they're running on their emotions, what happens is they wind up going out here and participating in behaviors that wind up where they not only do harm to others, but then they do harm to themselves. And that's all because they're caught up in their feelings about something, and they're so caught up in their feelings they can't think about the big picture of as related to consequences. And again, you would think a CEO would be able to think about these kind of things because they're all part of his job. And this is something that was sad to see. Again, your CEO going out here and participating in a riot where practically 5 people lost their lives and 2 police officers wound up losing their lives as a result of this. And again, you would think somebody with the leadership skills of a CEO would have tried to talk people out of doing these things, but he goes out there and then talks about how he wants to take his actions back. But again, if you're a critical thinker, you wouldn't have participated in those behaviors to begin with, because you understand that there's consequences for your behavior. But many of these people, they didn't think that there were any consequences for their behavior because They thought, oh, I'm a white person, and because I'm white and I have this white privilege, nobody's going to hold me accountable for my actions. And because they thought no one was going to hold them accountable for their actions, they thought they were going to get away with things the way their grandfathers did when they participated in lynchings, and their great grandfather, not only grandfathers, but great grandfathers, got away with burning down black towns like Rosewood and Black Wall Street. They thought they would be able to get away with their violence. Unfortunately, in a technologically advanced world, all of these racist and white supremacists were revealed, and these people, they cannot get away with their actions. No, these terrorists and seditionists need to be held accountable and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and a message needs to be sent to them that when you participate in urban terrorism, there will be a line drawn in the sand as related to your behavior. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction, you can find that on Amazon.com. And if you want to learn more about the dysfunctional behaviors of beta males, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. Smashwords, the iBookstore and Google Play. It goes in depth discussing the behaviors of these beta males and why they are a danger to everyone all around us. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.